schools don't typically seem to trust parents. And whether they're traditional and in person or online or anything else, what does it look like when a school trusts parents to know their child and then works with them to create the education that the parent and child are saying to them that they need, that they want, and that would work best for them? Instead of being top down, instead of saying like, hey, this is what we do, take it or leave it, what OpenEd Academy strives to do is to say, let's look at your child individually and let's build their education from the ground up around them instead of trying to get them to fit into a system that's built from the top down.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast. I'm Ella, your sometimes host, and today I'm joined by Teresa King, who has an incredible background in all things education, especially innovative education. So today we're going to be talking about her experiences and the OpenEd Academy specifically. So OpenEd Academy just launched recently. We're going to dive into why, what, all sorts of things that you get to look forward to. So welcome to the podcast.
Ella, I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, so kicking it off, what's the difference between OpenEd and the OpenEd Academy?
Great question. OpenEd Inc. exists and has existed for, 15 years to build partnerships between families and districts and other partners to broaden access to all sorts of different educational options through those partnerships. And in the OpenEd model, students actually become enrolled in the partner district. And that is what allows them to have access to a lot of opportunities that OpenEd can then provide as far as curriculum, extra resources, tutoring and support, and everything that goes with it. The OpenEd Academy, instead of being a district partnership model, is in fact its own virtual private school. So with the OpenEd Academy, families get to enroll directly with us and become students of our virtual private school. It is nationally accredited, and it is an opportunity for students and families to really drive their own education. We've designed it to be, not surprisingly, very open. So families have the opportunity to build the education that they want for their child with our guidance and support. We really want this to feel like the best of both worlds, right? The support and structure of a school to the extent that you want and need it to drive your vision for your child's education, with the freedom and openness of homeschooling and a lot of parent agency to know their child best and what they need.
I love that. And we'll get into more specifics as we go on. But can you kind of break down for me, like, why do you care about education and especially innovative education?
Yeah, I would love to. So I think, as with a lot of people who do work that's really mission driven, a lot of it's personal, right? So a lot of this comes from my own personal experiences as a student and my own personal experiences as a parent and my own personal experiences as an educator. I started in education over 20 years ago, which is crazy, as a public school teacher. I taught English, and I really noticed that there's a phrase in education that I don't know if it's necessarily taught in teacher preparation programs or if it's one of those things that teachers and administrators say to each other in a way to sort of get a grasp on what they've been asked to do, which is that you teach to the middle. And what that means is, as you're standing in front of a room of 32 children, there's going to be 32 different levels of readiness, 32 different backgrounds, 32 different foundational knowledge gaps that are missing, that need to get filled, that need to be addressed. There's going to be students in that room that are English language learners. There's going to be students in that room that have different IEPs and 504s that need those individual needs met. How do you, as one person, meet 32 different needs at once when you're standing in front of the room? All you can do at that point, and this is why the phrase exists, is teach to the middle. So if you can reach the middle of those 32 different students, right? What that means, of course, is that the two ends are ignored, right? If you're teaching to the middle 33%, there's 66% that are not getting what they need. They're not getting enough. They're getting too much. All of these things exist. So just seeing what those limitations were, like it does for a lot of teachers, it becomes very frustrating, because what you want to be able to do is individualize the instruction, because you know that that's best, because you care about each one of those kids as individuals, but there's not enough time in the day and there's not enough structures in place to be able to teach them as individuals. So after a few years, I actually moved into virtual education. I became a fully online instructor. And this was in the early days of virtual education. This was 2006. And at that point, we had calling cards that we used for long distance calls. You had to dial the student's number, and then you had to put in your 18-digit code to call long distance outside your area code. We had pagers. You may be too young for this, Ella. Do you remember the pagers?
I remember.
We had pagers so students could beep us and we would call them back. So that's the kind of technology that we were dealing with, but we were able to make it work. And it was the beginning of my love for finding ways to innovate, even in situations where in 2006, knowing that, we were going to have pagers and long distance calling cards, and there's no such thing as Zoom, obviously, right? And knowing all of those, what feel like limiting factors, what feel like things that you could point to and say, you can't teach virtually. How would that ever work? Right. And so that's the beginning for me of pushing the envelope of sure, there are limiting factors. Sure, there are things out of our control. Sure, there are things that we're going to have to work around. But if there's not a front door open, we will go around and find a window on the side to climb in through and make this work for kids. And that's kind of like the beginning of that innovative drive for me on how are we going to reach kids as individuals. I found that, and I think a lot of people find this when of course, virtual education is much larger now, more pervasive. There are a lot of ways to provide that now. And I think what I've found over the past 20 years of being a virtual instructor, supervising virtual instructors, working at the district level in virtual education, working for universities that are offering virtual K-12, all of the things that I've started and been a part of in the intervening years, every single person that had made the transition from traditional education over into more innovative ways of doing it said, I don't stand in front of students anymore. I don't see students physically anymore, but I know my students better than I ever did when I was in a traditional setting, because you have now the time and space to get to know them as people, because you're talking to them individually, you're having smaller group sessions over Zoom or any other kind of method for collaboration, you're talking to their families. I mean, how often in a traditional setting do you have time to talk to students' families? It just isn't there, right? Despite a lot of great efforts from a lot of hardworking people. So the surprise for a lot of folks who come to this industry is as the face-to-face physical time decreases, the actual individual interaction increases, which is not what people expect.
No, and I bet that there was a lot of pushback around like the virtual component, because there's so much there is something to be said for an in-person component, right? Like neither you nor I are going to argue that. There is something super valuable about the in-person component, but I think it's the trade-off question. Like what are the trade-offs? And I think there's something else to point out, which is like we're at different stages of innovation here. So like at the very beginning stage of innovation, you have the virtual school option, basically like you create something else, but like you don't have any secondary or like similar things to help around it. Whereas what you're seeing now is there are virtual options, and then there are lots of in-person classes and in-person co-ops and in-person things that people can opt into. So like you can now start to create the experience that you want and take the best of every single thing that is offered. Something that's fascinating to me though is the difference between like virtual ed and traditional school, in the sense that like to do virtual ed correctly, like I've heard horror stories of people doing virtual ed, and I bet you have too. But to do virtual school correctly, you really have to have the buy-in of the parent. Like it's an extremely different thing than in traditional school, where like the parent drops the kid off and that they're more involved in like testing, and like maybe they talk about homework and maybe they talk about things, maybe they don't. But like with virtual school, with virtual ed, with personalized ed and open ed, your parent really needs to be very involved in directing that. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think there's a lot of things at play there. There's so many structural things at play. I think for better or worse, in traditional ed, so much of it is prescriptive. So much of it is designed already. And as a parent, as essentially a consumer, right, of that service, you don't feel like you have a lot of room to provide input. There's what essentially would you provide input on? Many of those things can't be changed, right? There are a lot of hardworking, well-meaning, smart people in traditional education structures as teachers and administrators, and they're being told top down what to do. They're being told top down what the curriculum is that we're using, what the instructional method will look like. Most of it is driven by, a lot of times, unfortunately, money, right? This is how the school is funded. It's on seat time. It's on average daily minutes. It's on full-time equivalency, whatever you call it. It's on time and seats, which is not a barometer of learning, right? I don't know that a student has mastered any content at all just because he sat in a seat, but that's how a lot of traditional schools have to function, because that's how they keep the lights on, is making sure that they can document that there's time and seats. All of that is top down. And so parents who interact in that traditional school setting with the school, they feel that. They feel that it's top down. They feel that they don't have a lot of room for agency to make decisions for their child. And all of that comes into play at a structural level, right? I'm not here, none of us are, to vilify traditional education at all. I'm a product of public schools, and I've worked in public schools. I think that the way that parents are wanting to have a sense of agency and ownership around their child's education is a direct reflection of the ways that policy has driven top-down education, right? So this ability of, more innovative models to involve and engage parents, I think, is something that it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere, right? Like, this is not a fluke. This is not an aberration. It's not a temporary anomaly. This is the way that it's going to continue to go, because it's frustrating to interact with a system or a structure where you feel like you don't have any feedback to offer, right? So being able to, as a parent, kind of say like, well, I'm not entirely sure that this textbook that you're using for math, or this set of standards that you're using for math, is really the way that my child best learns math, right? So it's sort of this conflict, right? This is where you get this point of tension of, if this top-down sort of prescriptive system where there's one choice isn't working for my child as an individual, what do I do then? Because that structure isn't in a position to offer options, unfortunately. So yes, to your greater point of, in an innovative or new model, parents are more involved necessarily. I think that's sort of by design, right? And we, especially at OpenEd, have designed this to kind of meet the need of those parents who are looking around in a traditional structure and saying, if this doesn't work for me, I can't change anything here, right? This is set, unfortunately. So where can I go where I do have the ability to build, right? So instead of being top down, instead of saying like, hey, this is what we do, take it or leave it, right? Instead of that kind of a structure, what OpenEd Academy strives to do is to say, let's look at your child individually and let's build their education from the ground up around them, instead of trying to get them to fit into a system that's built from the top down.
I love
right?
this.
And yeah, parents are involved, and we really want parents to be involved. And quite frankly, a lot of things related to education don't work the way that they can if parents aren't involved. So we very much have designed this to partner with parents. We want to have those individual conversations that I was talking about earlier, to get to know a child as an individual and to hear from that child and from their family. How do they feel like they learn best, and how can we build something around them that meets their needs?
I love that. And I love how you frame this as a feature, not a bug. So it's not something that happened and that parents have to now like figure it out how to be involved. It is because parents are already involved, and because they already care about how their kids are being educated, how their kids are being taught, the values that their kids are being instilled, like, because they already care about that and they are asking questions and they're pushing back because, or maybe something's not working as best as it could. Like, that's the reason that we are getting innovative models, and not just innovative models, but like the type of innovative models that we are getting. I love that. Can you explain a little bit about the Academy? Like, what is this program that you're going to create and that you're actively creating? What is it going to allow families to do different than like maybe another virtual school or traditional school that they I guess we have these mental models that we're working from, these things that we understand how they work. How is the Academy different?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that at the end too, because it's so funny when I found myself talking, when I'm talking about the Academy, saying a lot of things that it's not, right? Because you sort of lean on the existing schema that you have around like, oh, well, what's a virtual school, right? So because we're trying so hard to sort of blow that up and start something completely new and different and open, I often talk about what it's not. So I want to talk about what it is. The OpenEd Academy is an opportunity for, like I said before, families and children together to build an individual education from the ground up around that child that works for that child. Here are the ways that we do that. Specifically, we are focused on several things. Obviously, a personalized learning plan. What does that mean? That sounds like jargon. It means that for each student, they will have one homeroom teacher who works only with them. And this is grades K through 12. I feel like sometimes some of this personalization and homeroom and getting to know students individually falls down a little bit at upper grade levels. And yes, sure, upper, 9 through 12, 11th and 12th graders, they're independent, they're older. But that doesn't mean that they don't need to be seen as people and as individuals. So that individual homeroom teacher support continues across all grade levels. And that is someone who's going to work with the student and parent and really think through what are your interests? What are your plans? What keeps you hooked? What do you love? What do you don't love? Let's build more of what you want and less of what you don't. Let's meet any gaps. And then let's meet any exceptionalities as far as, students who are extremely, extremely advanced in math, for instance, should have the opportunity to do work that is several grade levels, what we consider traditional grade levels, right, above where their age might indicate. And at the same time, do grade level work in English or social studies if that's what they need and want, right? So it's not, you might think of a traditional kind of gifted program. All of a sudden you have to do advanced work on everything because it's like, oh, you're gifted. So here's everything all at once. But actually, let's look at the course level, at the content level, at the interest level of what that child actually wants and needs across everything, not just let's make it easy by saying, oh, they're advanced. Here's advanced everything. Or, oh, they need remediation. So here's remedial everything, right? Let's actually individualize. That's what a personalized learning plan means. We're also going to provide customized curriculum. And what that means is in any other virtual school, you generally kind of enroll and you get told like, okay, well, here's your English course. Here's your courses. You don't get a lot of opportunity to select how you want the curriculum to look and feel. There are a lot of different curricula out there. Many of our audience members today are going to be parents who are currently homeschooling or considering homeschooling. And one of the biggest challenges and points of overwhelm when you're starting to look at that is curriculum. Like, oh my gosh, what do I use for all of these things? I've got English. Do I have to do something separate for reading? Are they going to get grammar? Are they going to get math and science and social studies and specials or electives or all of these things? It's overwhelming to try to pick between all of these different a la carte options. If you find one that offers all of them, do you like how they do all of them? Or are there ones that you wish you could pick and choose, but now you've paid for an entire curriculum of everything? That piece, we want to really help with the overwhelm. We want to be able to provide targeted solutions. So students and families in the OpenEd Academy will be able to pick at the course level across all of their courses what type of curriculum provider and platform they want to use for that course for that year. And so we're going to have a lot of different options. There's going to be different types of curriculum, some that are more written for students who like to take in reading, take some notes on their reading, really kind of process that way. There's going to be some curriculum types that are more visual, some that are fully kind of like slide based, where you get a visual carousel that's very engaging and changes. For our students who maybe have more of like a visual or even auditory kind of processing, right? Those types of options, I think, set it apart, because generally when you enroll in a virtual school, it again starts to feel very top down, right? Okay, well, here's your grade level. So here's your schedule, and all the curriculum comes from this place, and it all looks the same. And hope you like it, right? That's not that much different than the traditional in-person school structure that we were just talking about. It just is in a virtual setting. So we're not just taking traditional structures and moving them online. That's actually the last thing we want to do, right? What we want to do is leverage a lot of different options that being online lets us do in order to, again, build the options around your child. Personalized learning plans, curated curriculum, right? A lot of optionality around all of this. And if this is starting to sound overwhelming in its own way, just remember that you have your individual advisor and your homeroom teacher to help you decide best what's going to work for your individual student situation. And then really leaning into teacher support. And so in addition to the homeroom teacher, all of the courses will have their own academic instructors that are going to be working in that course with providing grading feedback and helping with progress. And then also tutoring support is available, credit counseling and academic advisement, especially for our older students. The OpenEd Academy will offer diplomas to graduating seniors in its first year. We're very excited about that. So getting that college counseling piece for our high schoolers and even starting younger than that, if college is a goal eventually for your student and your family, really getting in and figuring out how best to meet that goal individually with you and what that might look like. So all of those pieces are there. Plus, and I think this is important when you think about private school, whether it's virtually or in person, we've worked very hard to keep this at an affordable rate because what we're not trying to do is close education. We're really trying to open it up. And we can't do that if we've priced it at, a lot of different private virtual schools are out there at $8,000 a year, $10,000 a year, $14,000 a year. We're starting right now at $2,900 per student per year. And that is pretty exceptional, I think, across a lot of different options. And it's very deliberate. We're doing everything we can to democratize knowledge and access, right? To a lot of different options. So the complete personalized experience that I just described, but at a cost that we've worked very hard to keep as affordable as possible.
I love that. One thing that's also like so fascinating about the Academy is most virtual schools are for people that want traditional school, but in a different way. The Academy actually can serve homeschool families and people that are very not into the traditional, but it can also bridge that gap between like, okay, you are used to something very traditional and you want something that is kind of traditional, but also that gives you a lot of flexibility. Maybe you're a family that has travel needs, or maybe your family, like whatever it is that your needs are, like the Academy does a really good job of meeting you there. Can you speak a little bit to the part where it's like for homeschool families, this is a virtual school, right? In a sense, but like unlike anything you've ever seen before kind of thing.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great way to frame it. And that's exactly what we're hoping for is unlike anything you've ever seen. What we're trying to build and what we've put into place is a buffet. And that's how I think about it. And I don't know if it's too simplistic to describe it that way, but in so many settings, virtually or traditionally, you sit down and you're handed a menu and you literally have like 3 choices, right, to pick from. What we want for the OpenEd Academy is for it to be a buffet where you leave what you don't want and you take what you do. And what I mean by that is we will offer live time together, synchronous. We will offer that daily, weekly. It's always going to be optional, though. We're never going to say to a family, well, you signed up for this school, so every day at 2:00, you better be online because there's mandatory live check-ins. That doesn't meet the needs of every single family. We want you to drive your schedule. We'll never put mandatory check-ins in front of you. We'll never put top-down edicts in front of you because that's not the way that we want to open up education. So every student, every family that signs up gets to drive their own schedule. And that's a daily schedule. That's a course schedule. That's a completion schedule. I talked a little bit about getting to pick which kind of curriculum you want for each course. You also get to pick which kind of schedule you want for each course. So again, going back to my example from before, if your child is very advanced in math, loves doing math, always only wants to do math, you can tell us like, hey, listen, we're going to probably fly through this math class and we're going to finish it in about 4 months. Is that okay? Yes, that's okay. And you can also say, I have to we might have to drag him through this English course. We might take 11 months to do this English course. Is that okay? Yes, that's okay. Every single one of your courses can be paced and scheduled in a different way that meets your child's needs and meets your family's needs. So to your point, Ella, like if you are traveling, if you have other obligations, other opportunities that come up, if your child is very engaged in a sport or chess or dance or whatever else might be the case, school will fit around your schedule, not the reverse, right? You don't have to change your schedule to fit around school. We want this to fit your life. Now, the kind of other side of that is what you were mentioning before. For our families who really want a structure and really want a schedule, if you say that to us, if you say, listen, I know we could kind of leave this wide open and each course could have a different end date and we could do different kind of schedules, but that feels a little loosey-goosey, and I'm afraid that might not motivate my particular child to get their work done. And I don't want to have to be sort of the bad guy in my own house, always nagging about getting the work done. So we can then say, okay, great. We're going to put every single one of these courses on a set pace with set due dates at certain times. And we, the homeroom teacher, will work with you to hit those milestones and make plans to hit the next one together, right? We'll support whatever level of structure works best for your family's needs. And that's what I mean by a buffet, right? You can go up there and you can take from the very structured menu, right? That little bowl of structured, you can take from the kind of more open, flexible structure. Either way, we're going to offer accredited transcripts for credit that will travel with you wherever you go next and will eventually lead to a diploma if you stay with us through the end of 12th grade.
That's very cool.
The other thing I also want to say about sort of this flexibility when it comes to specifically to your question, like homeschooling families that may be looking at this, one thing that we also want to be aware of and what we've built in is the fact that not all learning takes place in our curriculum. There are so many students, and we know this because of running, especially our OpenEd program for the past 15 years, so many students that are doing so much learning outside of any kind of curriculum. And what I mean by that is like community service projects, entrepreneurial things that our kids have started. We've seen so many of these and they're incredible. The things that kids learn outside school should count as learning inside school. That's it. That's a big tenet for us. So one of the things that we're going to do is actually give transcript credit for real life learning. If you have a high schooler who, has been working at Chick-fil-A and recently moved up to like shift leader, has taken on all these responsibilities, is learning so much about interpersonal communication and management and time management and customer service and even like the finance pieces of like doing the register at night, all of those things, that's real life learning that should count for something, we feel, right? So we're going to be able to work with you on getting transcript credit on their actual, sort of report card, right? Their official transcript from us is going to be able to reflect the learning that you're doing in real life. So many of our homeschooling families go on incredible like educational trips, right? And they're visiting Civil War battlefields and they're going to different historical sites. All of that is learning that they're doing in real life. And we want to be able to give the credit that they deserve and that they really have learned this material. And so our transcripts are going to reflect that as well.
And that's also so huge. Why do you think an option like this is important? So like something that I've seen, especially being in this industry for a little while, is that there are the standard options and then there are starting to be things in between, but like there's not, if you were to start homeschooling it, or if you were to get to a point in your traditional education journey as a parent where you're like, okay, something's not working. You can't just say, now I'm going to build out the perfect education for my kid. Like now I'm going to imagine like, what would my perfect experience be? It would be like, we have the support of this. We don't have the top down whatever of this. We like it truly would be a mix and match. It would be like, if I could build out my perfect thing, at least for me, it'd be like, okay, well, I'd have somebody that I could go to for questions. I'd have I'd have, like if I could build it out perfectly, like this is what it would look like. But in the past, you didn't have that opportunity and that option. It was like you choose either or, and like you accept the pains that come along with the either or. So like in the past, like shout out to all the old homeschoolers that have been homeschooling for like 20 plus years. They did it with nothing, and they did it with a lot of pushback and a lot of people looking at them and not understanding. On the other side, like there are so many people that are in the system that wish that they could have done something different but couldn't. Like that's what I see.
It's so true. You leave one kind of mode modality of education for another one, and you've just sort of flown out of the frying pan and into the fire, right? It's like, well, I've just created different trade-offs. Moving to this full-time virtual school has meant that I don't have to fight a battle every morning at 7 a.m. to get him up because he can start at 9 a.m. So that's great. But at the same time, I didn't get to pick the course types. I don't get to change his schedule based on his abilities or interests or needs. I don't get to determine what the schedule is. It still has a rigid first day of school and a last day of school. If he's not finished with all of these classes on the last day of school, which is an arbitrary calculation, then he fails, right? Those are still limitations. It's just that they're online, right? That's not as innovative as I think we can be in 2025. And it's not as open as I think students deserve, right? So why don't we, and this is, as we're kind of part of this open education movement overall, you asked me at the top, how does this differ from OpenEd, right? How is OpenEd different from OpenEd Academy? How they're similar is the fact that we literally share the same vision, and how we go about reaching that vision is kind of different ways to provide different options for families based on what they like best. But that vision is to create a world where every child can build the education they need. And when all you've done is taken traditional structures and move them online, and when all you've done is sort of replicate what's already known and keep that feeling of, well, we're the school, so we know best. That's one of the biggest things that I want to get away from with OpenEd Academy, is that it's just this lack of trust, I think, is what it comes down to, is that schools don't typically seem to trust parents. And whether they're traditional and in person or online or anything else, what does it look like when a school trusts parents to know their child and then works with them to create the education that the parent and child are saying to them that they need, that they want, and that would work best for them? That's really where we want to start, and where we see like a differential, right? And so, like, to your point about like, why is this needed and how is this different and what's gonna, that driving factor of, online, in person, full-time, whatever, all of those things seem to often share sort of this kind of feeling, right? This sense that parents have, and I felt it as a parent, right? Of, I couldn't possibly speak up because, they're the school, they know best, right? And schools having that same kind of feeling of like, well, sure, but listen, this is what we need to do. These are what our standards are for 6th grade math. So I hear you saying that, like, you feel that your child is more advanced than this, or you feel like this is too advanced for your child, but he's 12, so he's in 6th grade, and this is what we do for 6th grade math. Like, that kind of prescriptive, rigid approach, I really think is rooted in a lack of trust. So you can see this is what we wanted to build in, and you can see it in a lot of different things that I've talked about as far as the specifics of what does your day look like in OpenEd Academy. The fact that we will listen and trust and understand the learning that's taking place outside our school, that is a foundation based on trust. The fact that we really want to partner with parents, that is part of our foundation based on trust. To your question, which is a great one, like, why is this needed and how is this different? It's because I feel like there's so many parents out there who are looking around at the structures that have been built in person, in traditional ed, in virtual ed, and kind of saying, like, it kind of feels all the same, right? And so at that point, they're like, I guess my only option is to homeschool. And so for those types of parents, we're wanting to answer that call to say, like, yes, you can have the homeschool, the things that you're looking for when you say, I guess I just have to homeschool. You can have those with the structure and support of a school. We will meet that need, and we will trust you when we do it.
I love that. I think the vision that I see is like flourishing on an individual level as opposed to just getting by. I have this phrase that I repeat in my head. It's like, when individuals flourish, societies flourish. At a micro level, you have individuals that are living in their best, that have figured out what it is that they're good at. Because you don't just usually have like an aha moment. It's like, okay, I'm incredible at this, and this is where I'm going to go for the rest of my life. It's like, it's a discovery process. It's like, okay, I like this. I'm going to do more of this. I've found this little thing that I like inside of this. And it's like, you're finding the things that you are good at. You're finding the industries that you can help and that light you up. And like, even from like a kid level, I talk to my family about this quite often. I'm like, I feel like for my education, one of the things that was the hardest possible was because I went through a traditional school experience and it was very prescriptive. I never learned all the things that I could win at, right? So like there are a set number of games that you can play inside of a traditional setting. And if your family can't give you experiences outside of that, or like they don't even know where to begin, then
Right.
you never experience like feeling like you're good at something or like feeling like you win at something. And like I think
True.
that's key for kids is finding something that you can be great at and then pursuing that and then pursuing it more. And like that is the path of like finding your passion and like building on it. One thing that's difficult though, and that's kind of why I prefaced with that, is when the path is not prescriptive and when there are not a set number of games that you can play, it feels risky, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it feels risky to say, okay, you can pick it yourself. You can build your own adventure. You can try any of these curriculums. You are going to be kind of leading your kids education with support, of course, but it feels risky. Like what if let's say we're in 6th grade math or 6th grade and math's not going great and we've tried 3 different curriculums and we feel like failures, and like if we were in the regular school system we'd feel great because by the end of the year he got through math, right? Like there is a set standard of like, okay, this is success in traditional school, and I feel like you almost have to redefine it in a personalized education world because, for example, going through 3 different curriculums for us would be considered success. Can you speak a little bit to that experience as well?
No, it is. And there's what comes, it's part and parcel for the sort of factory experience of education that unfortunately so many of us had. And part of what we're trying to change is that only the learning that the system has determined is valid gets validated. So we have, 3 different levels of Minecraft electives, right? We have Minecraft as a course on your schedule that you get credit for and that you learn even more about and that you can share with your peers and you can become a peer mentor, right? For students in OpenEd Academy that are just starting out. You have learning there, and that learning translates to skills. And those skills are things that you can start to share. And at that point, you're learning about collaboration. You're learning about how to structure information that you know in your head in a way that you can transfer to others. Those are workplace skills, right? Those are real life, real world, adult level professional skills. Those are the real world communication skills that employers value that you will need for the rest of your life. Right? Like that's part of being in a society, to your point, that is enriched. And so I think that, the fact that it does feel a little risky, it does feel a little unknown, those are the ways that it reflects the growth. I think this is all of us kind of growing together on what education can be. And if you ask anyone, in my opinion, if you ask anyone who went through a traditional education, if they have a story of feeling very bad about themselves in school, they will say yes. They will say that, oh yeah, everyone was always done with their work before me in class because I just took so long to do the same math problems. Everyone else seemed to get it. I always had a question, but I didn't want to raise my hand because I felt like I was the only one who didn't know, right? All of those things are there because they probably had a ton of skills in a lot of areas that happen to be the areas that aren't validated by traditional education. And so, part of what we can do with opening up education is helping children recognize where their skills are and validating them, whether it's something that's traditionally taught on a school schedule or not. And that's what's so exciting to me too, right? We talked at the top about like, why do I do this work and how did I get into doing this? And a lot of it's personal, right? Because I saw as an educator, the students who, like I said before, were getting lost, right? Because we weren't able to individualize the way that we wanted to. And I think you're exactly right. There's a lot of skills outside of the 4 core subjects. And, the other thing I would say about this, and I've said this so many times, I say this to my own kids, they're 18 and 14. And so they're at an age where, my daughter's in college and she just finished her first year of college. And she's like, I'm not really sure what I want to do. She's like, should I be worried? And I tell her, every job that I've ever had, with the exception of when I taught my first couple years, right, in a traditional setting, every job that I've ever had didn't exist when I was in high school. So like I went on to be a virtual teacher and a virtual principal and a district leader in a virtual school, and then moved into educational technology to deliver online courses to different schools and professional development and how to teach in an online setting. None of those things existed when I was in high school. I could not have, as a 16-year-old or 17-year-old, looked at you and said, like, well, what I'd really love to do is work in virtual educational technology. It didn't exist, right? So there's also some level of like embracing the fact that when we validate the skills outside of English, social studies, science, math, when we recognize by knowing students as individuals and validate those skills and build them with them through opportunities, we're actually empowering them to live and work in a future that we don't know about yet.
Wow, I love that. Okay, I'm going to hit you with a couple rapid fire questions, and that'll wrap it up for today. What is your vision of education in the future? Say like 5 years, since 10 is who knows.
I think it's going to include AI. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's going to include AI. And my hope is that it is intelligent AI that can do a lot of what I was just saying, which is like draw out and expand on skills that people have, that students have, that will actually help them from like almost a tutoring perspective of not giving them the answers, right? But helping them get to answers to sort of do like intelligent work with them. So I think it's going to include AI, and I think it's going to become even more over time. I think it's become more broadly personalized, which might not sound like it makes sense, but I think there's going to be a more broad opportunity for deep personalization, which I think is just going to lead to incredible outcomes. It's going to let people see their wins, and it's just going to empower so many people.
What is your best advice to parents that are not sure about how to even do any of this personalized stuff?
I don't blame you. It's so much, right? It feels like so much. And I know this is our rapid fire portion, but I'm just going to tell a quick story. I had been involved in education. I had done all those things. And then I had my daughter, and she was in kindergarten, and her kindergarten teacher called me, and she said, because I had sort of asked a question in email, like, hey, is this okay that she's not yet doing such and such? Right. And her kindergarten teacher called me and she said, she's doing just great. You're doing everything great. And I hung up the phone and cried because I didn't know how much that kind of like validation would mean to me as a parent. And it's so scary because you're like making these little humans and you don't want to mess them up. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's like, that's your anxiety as a parent, is like, am I doing the right thing? Is this going to ultimately be to their benefit? And that's the worry. So I think as you're looking at different ways of kind of going about education, you're like, I just don't want to mess them up. I don't want to put them at a deficit. I don't want to look back on this and regret it, thinking like, oh my gosh, they could have done X, Y, and Z, but I messed this up. That's what that's the anxiety as a parent. So I think if you're looking at it and you're worried about it and you're wondering about it, call me. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Is like, we're running this program. We're just a bunch of people too, right? We happen to have experience in education and in building educational models and in helping students succeed. So the same way, if you had a question about why your plants weren't growing, you'd call an arborist. If you have a question about how to help your child best succeed in education, call us. A lot of people here will talk to you about it. We'll tell you what we've seen. Tell us about what you're looking for and what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. We may not offer a program that best meets what you're describing, and that's okay. We won't try to fit you into what we're doing if that's not the best move for your child, but we're happy to talk to you about it anytime.
I love it. And last question, where would you begin? So like, let's say that you were starting with personalized ed. You're like, okay, this is for me. Now what?
Yeah. Honestly, start small. I think it's part of the challenge. Sometimes you're raising this tiny human and the stakes are high and you feel that and you really want to do right by them. Start small. What do you want to do for school this year? That's it. What do you want to do for school for the next 6 months even? There's so many options and ways to blend them and different things to go about. Just start small. My daughter did something a little bit different for every school year for about 5 school years in a row. 1 year she homeschooled. 1 year she went to traditional school. 1 year she did a hybrid thing. Your kids are changing every year. You know that. Their educational needs may change every year, and that's okay. So don't get too caught up in the stakes of what are we going to do for their education. Just kind of think about like, what does this child need right now? And it may be different from the other children in your house. Even they're all going to have different kind of needs as time goes on. So kind of looking at, all right, this isn't working for this child. What are we going to do for this year? And then you can see how it goes. And I think if you can start small, keep the perspective, and then design solutions, and we're happy to help with it, just to kind of figure out, like, what do we do for this year and how do we see how it works
this year?
Yeah, for this child, for this month, for this year, for this course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier whenever it's like, okay, we will temp check this throughout. Like, it is okay to temp check it. So it empowers the child, not just the parent. But like for me, for example, like I had a really hard time understanding science for the longest time. And it's just like I couldn't read a book and just like take in all the facts.
No, right.
That's not how my brain works. But like if somebody would have asked me throughout science classes, like what is your, like, what is going on, and like let me just explain and talk through it. Like I think even as a student, like you don't diagnose yourself as bad at X, you start figuring it out. I want to be a doctor, and I'm not just like naturally getting this science stuff because of the way that it's being taught to me. That's okay too. How can I solve for that? It's like you create a new ability to achieve your goals whenever you can actually diagnose problems around it.
Yes. And it's so empowering to be able to, like, first of all, to be able to be offered the time and space reflection, and then to be supported in it, right? Like through a teacher, to be able to sit down with you and like with a parent and kind of say, like, lead with curiosity, right? What's going on? What do we feel like is happening here? Let's figure it out. I really want to figure it out with you. That's huge. That's everything to a kid. And it can make a difference that lasts their whole life because, you know, now they've decided to actually go into medicine because somebody actually sat with them and worked through and helped them get to know their own brain better.
I love it. This has been so cool to get to know your story and just kind of like your mission. A lot of people that listen to the podcast are very familiar with OpenEd and just learning about the Academy. So if you want to learn more, we have an info guide that you can get for free on openedacademy.com. What is the difference between OpenEd and OpenEd Academy? Maybe see who it could be good for too, because we offer the OpenEd Academy nationwide and in international countries. So there's an opportunity here for personalized ed for everyone. So it was so good to have you on, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Ella. Love this.